Welcome to Past Midnight. You're listening to a history piece about something that changed the world, the Industrial Revolution. It's not just a bunch of dates and inventions. It's a story about how people transformed their lives, their work, and even how they saw the world around them. So get comfortable. We're going to dive into a period that kicked off in the late 1700s and stretched into the 1800s. You'll hear how ordinary folk started to move from farms to factories. We'll talk about the impact of steam engines and how they powered a new age. You might be surprised to learn about the unexpected social changes that came with all that machinery and smoke. But it's not just about machines. This is also a tale of innovation and struggle. There's a wild story about a man who made a big splash in the textile industry. Yeah, and you'll see how some of these developments sparked movements for workers' rights. There's plenty of human drama mixed in with technological progress, and that's what makes it all fascinating. We'll explore how new ideas about economics and society took root, and how they shape the way we live today. You'll get a glimpse into the lives of those who paved the way for modern industry, and I promise, there are some surprising turns along the way. So, where should we start? The Industrial Revolution kicked off around the late 18th century, changing the world in ways that still resonate today. It's not just a chapter in history, it's a shift that transformed how people lived, worked, and interacted with each other. But what sparked this dramatic change? Well, let's dig into that. First off, the Industrial Revolution began in Britain, roughly around the 1760s. But why there? One reason was the access to resources. Britain had plenty of coal and iron, which were essential for powering machines and building them. Plus, the country had a strong trading network and colonies, providing both raw materials and markets for finished goods. This combination of factors set the stage for what was to come. Now, you might be wondering how people felt about these changes. Imagine living in a quiet village where everyone knew each other, and then suddenly factories started popping up. These factories were not just noisy, they brought tons of workers from rural areas into towns. This shift changed communities and social structures overnight. Families were uprooted, and a new way of life emerged as people sought jobs in these burgeoning industrial centres. Yeah, one of the most fascinating aspects of this revolution is the technology that emerged. The steam engine, invented by James Watt in the late 1700s, is a prime example. Before this invention, machinery was primarily powered by water or human labour. The steam engine opened up new possibilities, enabling factories to be built anywhere, not just near rivers. It also revolutionised transportation, making trains and steamships viable for the first time. Imagine travelling across the country by train, something that would have seemed impossible just a few decades earlier. But let's not ignore the human cost of this rapid change. Factory work was often harsh and dangerous. Workers, including women and children, faced long hours in terrible conditions. It wasn't uncommon for them to work 12-hour days, 6 days a week. Accidents were frequent, and job security was almost non-existent. These harsh realities led to the rise of labour movements and the eventual push for better working conditions and rights. As factories grew, cities expanded rapidly. Just think about Manchester, for example. By 1850, it had transformed from a small market town into one of the largest industrial cities in the world, with a population nearing 300,000. This kind of urbanisation wasn't just a British phenomenon. It spread across Europe and eventually to the United States and beyond. Cities became melting pots of culture and ideas, but they also struggled with overcrowding, pollution and health issues. The Industrial Revolution also had a massive impact on agriculture. Innovations like the seed drill and crop rotation helped increase food production. This meant fewer people were needed to farm, like pushing many into cities for work. It's a wild thought. While people were moving into urban areas, the very way they fed themselves was changing. leading to a society increasingly reliant on industrial processes. Now, let's talk about the economy. The shift from a mostly agrarian economy to an industrial one marked a significant change in how goods were produced and consumed. The introduction of machines led to mass production, which allowed for cheaper goods and increased competition. Think about it. Before the revolution, goods were often handmade and expensive, but suddenly you could find a variety of products at lower prices. This accessibility changed consumer behavior and paved the way for a culture of consumption. One of the unexpected consequences of this new economy was the rise of the middle class. As factories sprung up and jobs were created, a new social class emerged. This middle class was composed of factory owners, managers, and skilled workers who had more disposable income. They began to value education and leisure time, leading to social changes that would reshape society in fundamental ways. But not everything was rosy. The effects of rapid industrialization sparked debates about morality and ethics. Writers like Charles Dickens highlighted the struggles of the working class, painting a stark picture of life in industrial cities. These stories not only raised awareness but also helped fuel reform movements. People began to question the status quo and pushed for changes in child labour laws, education, and workers' rights. The Industrial Revolution didn't just stay confined to Britain, it spread to Europe and North America, where it took on different shapes and forms. In the United States, the revolution gained momentum in the early 19th century, leading to the growth of cities like Chicago and New York. The technological innovations continued, with inventions like the cotton gin and the telegraph further changing the landscape. What's perhaps most curious is how the revolution influenced global dynamics. Countries that industrialized quickly gained an upper hand in global trade and politics. The balance of power shifted, leading to imperial ventures that sought new markets and resources. This connectedness changed the world in ways that are still relevant today, as products and ideas moved across borders like never before. So what's the takeaway? The Industrial Revolution was about more than machines and factories. It reshaped societies, economies, and cultures on a global scale. It brought tremendous progress, but also deep social challenges. If you've ever wondered why our world works the way it does today, many of those roots start here. As we move further into the story of the Industrial Revolution, it's fascinating to look at the key players who emerged during this time. One name that often comes up is Adam Smith, whose ideas laid the groundwork for modern economics. His book, The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776, argued that free markets could lead to greater efficiency and wealth creation. Smith's theories on self-interest and competition started to change the way people thought about business and trade. He suggested that when individuals pursue their own interests, they inadvertently benefit society as a whole. This idea sparked a business revolution, as encouraging innovation and entrepreneurship. But while Smith painted an optimistic picture, the reality for many workers was quite different. The rise of the factory system brought about a strict division of labour, which made jobs repetitive and exhausting. Instead of skilled artisans taking pride in their work, labourers became cogs in a massive machine. Many factory owners prioritised profit over the well-being of their employees, leading to a dehumanising work environment. This shift raised important questions about labour rights and ethics. The contrast between the wealthy industrialists and the struggling workers became a focal point for social critics. One of the most notable figures who emerged as a voice for change was Robert Owen. A successful factory owner himself, and Owen advocated for better working conditions and the rights of workers. He believed that better treatment could lead to increased productivity and morale. Owen even established a utopian community in New Lanark, Scotland, where he applied his ideas about cooperative living and education. His vision was ambitious. He wanted to create a society where workers could thrive, not just survive. As Owen spread his ideas, he inspired others to rethink the relationship between workers and employers, igniting early labour movements. Speaking of movements, it's essential to mention the role of unions. As conditions in factories remained grim, workers began to organise. The first unions formed in the early 19th century, fighting for better wages, shorter hours, and safer working conditions. These groups often faced fierce opposition from factory owners and the government. Strikes and protests became common as workers pushed back against exploitation. The struggle was tough, but these early unions laid the foundation for labour rights that we often take for granted today. While workers were grappling with these challenges, the revolution sparked a wave of innovation that changed everyday life. The textile industry was one of the first to feel the impact. Innovations like the spinning jenny and the power loom revolutionised how fabric was produced. Instead of labour-intensive hand weaving, machines allowed for mass production. This not only made textiles cheaper, but also made fashion more accessible. Imagine going from a world where only the wealthy could afford diverse clothing to one where almost everyone could enjoy new styles. This shift in accessibility reshaped cultural norms and expectations. Transportation also underwent a remarkable transformation during this period. The steam engine, which we've already touched on, was a game changer. Railroads began to crisscross countries, allowing goods and people to move faster than ever before. In a matter of years, you could travel from London to Liverpool in just a few hours, something that would have taken days by horse and carriage. This connectivity boosted trade and opened up new markets. Suddenly, the world felt smaller, and people became more aware of what was happening beyond their local communities. But there's a flip side to this rapid development. While cities grew and industries flourished, they also faced significant challenges. Overcrowding became a major issue, with people living in cramped, unsanitary conditions. Diseases spread quickly in these urban areas, and public health crises were common. The infamous cholera outbreaks in the mid-19th century highlighted the dire need for sanitary reform. The connection between industrialization and public health became a pressing concern, forcing society to consider the consequences of rapid urban growth. With so many changes happening, education also started to shift. As the demand for skilled workers increased, more people sought education beyond basic literacy. The middle class began to value education as a means of social mobility. This led to the establishment of public schools and universities, making education more accessible to the general population. The idea that education could transform lives and lead to better job prospects became widely accepted. This emphasis on education changed how society viewed knowledge, creating a culture that valued learning and expertise. Interestingly, the Industrial Revolution didn't just change what people did for a living, it also reshaped their leisure time. As work hours became more defined, especially with the efforts of labour movements to reduce excessive hours, people found they had more time for hobbies and entertainment. The rise of public parks, theatres and other recreational spaces marked a shift in how people spent their free time. This new leisure culture began to flourish in the late 19th century, leading to an explosion of creativity in arts, literature and sports. This cultural growth was mirrored in the arts. Romanticism, for example, emerged as a reaction to the industrialization. Artists and writers began to focus on emotion, nature and individualism, often critiquing the mechanical nature of industrial life. This movement helped to highlight the human experience and the struggles faced by ordinary people in an increasingly impersonal world. The Industrial Revolution was undeniably a complex and multifaceted event. It didn't just change economies and societies, it redefined human experiences in profound ways. As we continue this journey through history, we'll explore how these changes laid the groundwork for modern society. setting the stage for further innovations and challenges that would follow in the 20th century and beyond. So, yeah, stick around. There's still plenty more to discover about how the ripples from this revolution continue to shape our world today. The Industrial Revolution was not just about factories and machines. It was also about how people connected, interacted, and transformed their lives in response to overwhelming changes. Amidst the hustle of industrial cities, social classes began to shift and evolve. The rise of the working class led to a new social dynamic, where labourers pushed back against the previous norms of aristocratic power. This struggle was not just about economic conditions, it was a fight for identity, respect, and a voice in an ever-changing world. As workers organised themselves into unions, they started to gain a sense of solidarity. This unity proved powerful, leading to significant victories, like the Factory Acts in Britain. These laws aimed to regulate working conditions, limit child labour, and set maximum working hours. One notable act was the Factory Act of 1833, which limited the working hours for children and required factory inspections. Such progress didn't happen overnight. It took years of activism, protests, and sometimes violent clashes. Yet, each small victory built momentum, inspiring more workers to stand up for their rights. At the same time, the middle class was growing rapidly. Industrialists and entrepreneurs who had once been in the shadows of aristocracy were now amassing wealth and influence. They craved recognition and social standing, which led to a newfound emphasis on respectability. This middle class began to shape cultural norms, promoting values like hard work, education, and family life. It was a stark contrast to the chaotic world of the factory floor, as these families sought stability and security. Interestingly, this shift didn't just impact social structures, it also influenced politics. The demand for representation grew louder. The Reform Act of 1832 was a response to the changing dynamics, expanding the electorate by giving more men the right to vote. While it didn't grant universal suffrage, it was a significant step towards more inclusive political participation. This act reflected the broader push for democracy that emerged during the Industrial Revolution. People wanted a say in their governance, especially as they faced the consequences of rapid industrialization. As cities expanded, they began to adopt new technologies that dramatically changed urban life. The introduction of gaslighting, for instance, transformed the nighttime landscape. Streets once shrouded in darkness became safer and more inviting, encouraging social gatherings and commerce after sunset. People started to venture out more, exploring local markets, attending public lectures, or enjoying leisurely strolls in newly created parks. This shift in urban life created a buzz of excitement, but it also brought challenges. The rapid growth of cities often outpaced infrastructure development, leading to issues like pollution and inadequate sanitation. Speaking of sanitation, the public health crisis prompted some innovative solutions. The cholera outbreaks of the 1830s and 1840s were pivotal. Public awareness grew around hygiene and health, leading to significant investments in clean water systems and sewage disposal. Visionaries like Sir Joseph Basil Jett in London designed extensive sewer systems that drastically improved public health. This connection between industrial progress and public health was crucial, as people started to realize that their living conditions were linked to their well-being. Education continued to evolve in this environment too. With the growth of industries, there was a burgeoning need for educated workers. The push for public education gained traction, leading to the establishment of more schools across Britain and beyond. The Education Act of 1870 marked a significant milestone by laying the groundwork for compulsory education. This change meant children, regardless of their background, had access to learning, setting the foundation for a more informed and skilled workforce. As the Industrial Revolution marched on, It brought about radical changes in art, literature, and philosophy. Writers and artists began to respond to their changing world, grappling with themes of alienation, progress, and the complexities of modern life. The novels of Charles Dickens, for instance, painted vivid pictures of the struggles faced by the urban poor. His characters, often caught in the gears of industrial progress, became iconic representations of the era's social issues. Simultaneously, the Romantic movement in art and literature emerged as a counterpoint to industrialization. Artists began to focus on individual emotion and nature, often critiquing the harsh realities of factory life. They sought to capture the beauty of the natural world as well as the inner lives of individuals. This artistic response highlighted the human spirit's resilience in the face of overwhelming change. While we often think of the Industrial Revolution as a purely Western phenomenon, its effects rippled globally. Countries in Europe, Asia, and the Americas began to adopt industrial methods, each in their unique contexts. The spread of technologies like the steam engine and telegraph connected far-flung regions, and trade blossomed as nations sought new markets for their goods. This interconnectedness began to reshape global economies and foster new relationships between countries. As we reflect on the Industrial Revolution, it's clear that its impacts were far-reaching and complex. It wasn't simply a matter of machines taking over. It was a profound transformation of society itself. Amidst the chaos and challenges, there were also moments of triumph and innovation. The era laid the groundwork for the modern world we live in today, setting the stage for future advancements and social changes. Next, we look at how these shifts carried into the 20th century and shaped modern life. As the Industrial Revolution progressed, it ushered in a wave of innovation that went beyond just machines and factories. At the heart of this transformation was the development of new technologies that not only changed how goods were produced but also how people communicated and moved about. One of the most significant advancements was the steam engine, which revolutionized transportation. Initially developed in the early 18th century, steam power began to be applied to locomotives and ships. You're creating a network of railways and steamships that connected cities and regions like never before. Imagine a time when travel could take weeks or even months. Now, with trains, journeys that once seemed impossible became achievable in just a matter of hours. By the mid-19th century, the rail network in Britain had expanded dramatically, with over 6,000 miles of track laid down, facilitating the movement of people and goods across the country. This connectivity not only boosted trade and commerce, but also changed social dynamics, as people could now visit relatives or explore new places easily. The story of the railroads is fascinating. Take George Stephenson, for example. He built the first successful steam locomotive named the Locomotion No. 1, which started its runs in 1825 on the Stockton and Darlington Railway. Stephenson's innovations set off a race across Europe and the United States to create faster and more efficient trains. Railways transformed economies, making it easier to transport raw materials to factories and finished goods to consumers. The ripple effects were profound, leading to urbanization as people flocked to cities for jobs and changing the very fabric of society. But let's not overlook the role of another groundbreaking invention, the telegraph. Developed in the 1830s and 1840s, this device allowed messages to be sent over long distances almost instantaneously. Samuel Morse, an American artist and inventor, played a crucial role in developing the telegraph and Morse code, a system of dots and dashes that represented letters. This communication revolution meant that news could travel faster than ever before. And just think, important events, like the end of wars or stock market changes, could be shared in real time. It brought the world closer together, creating a sense of shared experience and awareness. However, The Industrial Revolution wasn't all progress and excitement. The rapid changes brought about serious challenges, particularly related to labour conditions. Factories often relied on harsh working environments. Long hours, low wages, and unsafe conditions were the norms, especially for women and children, who made up a significant portion of the workforce. The economic pressures of the time pushed many families into factories, where they worked in appalling conditions just to make ends meet. As the working class grew, so did the awareness of these issues. Labour movements began to gain traction, advocating for better conditions, unfair pay, and reasonable hours. Strikes became more common as workers organised to demand their rights. The push for reform wasn't just about better jobs, it was about dignity and respect. During the 19th century, this collective action led to the establishment of trade unions, which gave workers a more powerful voice. One key milestone in this struggle was the establishment of the Trades Union Act of 1871 in Britain, which legalised trade unions and gave workers the right to strike. This was a significant victory, as it marked a shift in the balance of power between workers and employers. The ability to organise and demand change laid the groundwork for future labour rights, impacting generations to come. While workers were fighting for their rights, the Industrial Revolution also sparked significant advancements in science and medicine. The period saw groundbreaking discoveries that would shape public health and improve living conditions. The field of medicine was revolutionised as doctors and scientists began to understand diseases better. The germ theory of disease, developed in the late 19th century by figures like Louis Pasteur, changed how society viewed health and hygiene. No longer could illness be attributed solely to miasma or bad air. Instead, it was understood that germs played a crucial role in spreading diseases. These insights led to improved sanitation practices and the development of vaccines, which significantly reduced the prevalence of previously deadly diseases. The shift towards scientific thinking also encouraged public health initiatives, such as clean water supply systems and improved waste management. People began to see a correlation between their living conditions and their health, which was a revolutionary idea at the time. Art and culture mirrored these societal shifts. The Industrial Revolution inspired new artistic movements, with many artists reflecting on the changes happening around them. The Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, for instance, emerged in the mid-19th century, emphasizing a return to nature and traditional craftsmanship in response to industrialization. Their works often depicted themes of beauty, nature, and longing for a simpler, more authentic existence. At the same time, the rise of realism in literature and art captured the everyday struggles of ordinary people, moving away from the romanticized versions of life. Authors like Émile Zola in France depicted the harsh realities of industrial life, focusing on the working class and their challenges. This literary movement pushed readers to confront the impacts of industrialization on society and brought attention to social injustices. As we explore these interconnected themes, it's clear that the Industrial Revolution was not just about machines and factories. It was an era of profound change that touched nearly every aspect of life. From transportation and communication to labour rights and public health, this period laid the foundation for many modern advancements. Next, we trace how industrial change shaped urban planning and global trade. As the Industrial Revolution continued to unfold, it brought about a significant shift not only in technology and society, but also in how people viewed their relationship with nature. Before this transformative era, agriculture dominated daily life. People lived in close harmony with the land, relying on its rhythms. However, as factories sprang up and urban areas expanded, this connection diminished. The landscape changed dramatically, with sprawling cities and industrial sites replacing fields and forests. This transition raised questions about environmental impact. The growth of factories led to pollution, deforestation, and a general disregard for the natural world. Smoke filled the skies, Rivers became polluted with waste, and the industrial noise disrupted the peace of communities. People began to notice the adverse effects of industrialization on their health and the environment. For instance, cities like London faced severe air quality issues, leading to illnesses that became all too common. In response to these changes, a counter-movement began to take root. Romanticism emerged as a reaction against the rapid industrialization and urbanization. Artists, poets, and thinkers celebrated nature and the human spirit, advocating for a return to simpler, more meaningful ways of living. Figures like William Wordsworth and John Keats expressed a yearning for the beauty of the natural world, emphasizing the importance of emotional and spiritual connections to nature. This sentiment inspired a push for conservation and awareness of environmental issues, laying the groundwork for future movements. While some were lamenting the loss of nature, others were embracing the new opportunities industrialization provided. The rise of consumer culture was a significant aspect of this period. With factories producing goods at an unprecedented scale, items that were once luxuries became accessible to a broader population. For the first time, people could buy things like clothing, household goods, and even toys. The emergence of department stores and mail-order catalogues changed how people shopped, creating a new landscape of consumerism. This newfound access to goods didn't just change shopping habits, it altered lifestyles and expectations. Families began to prioritize material possessions, and advertisements started to play a crucial role in shaping desires. The dream of owning a home filled with modern conveniences became a central aspiration for many. It's interesting to consider how this shift in mindset laid the foundation for our contemporary relationship with consumer goods, where purchasing is often tied to identity and status. But as people became more focused on consumption, the stark divide between social classes became increasingly apparent. The wealth generated by industrialists often contrasted sharply with the struggles of the working class. Wealthy factory owners lived in luxury, while labourers faced grueling conditions just to make a living. This disparity led to a growing sense of unrest and social tension. Labour rights movements weren't just about better pay and working hours, they also highlighted the need for social justice. Women, in particular, played a vital role in this struggle, advocating not only for better working conditions but also for rights such as suffrage. The connection between labour rights and women's rights became increasingly evident, as many women worked in factories under dire conditions yet were denied the same rights as their male counterparts. The fight for social equity gained traction in the latter half of the 19th century. Activists like Emmeline Pankhurst in Britain rallied support for women's voting rights, making significant strides, though not without considerable opposition. This period marked a crucial moment in history when the voices of the marginalised began to be heard, pushing against the tide of industrial progress that often overlook their rights. As the century turned, the Industrial Revolution evolved into what some historians consider its second phase. Innovations in electricity and chemical processes began to emerge, propelling industries into new territories. The invention of the electric light bulb by Thomas Edison in the late 19th century marked a dramatic change in how people lived and worked. Factories could now operate longer hours, and cities were illuminated at night, transforming public life. Electricity also sparked new inventions, including the telephone, invented by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876. This device revolutionized communication once again, allowing people to converse over long distances instantly. Imagine the thrill of receiving a call from a loved one who lived hundreds of miles away. It changed relationships and business models, creating a world that felt smaller and more interconnected. But the advancements didn't stop there. The late 19th century also saw the rise of the modern corporation. As businesses grew in size and complexity, new management practices emerged to handle labour, production and distribution on an unprecedented scale. The concept of limited liability allowed more people to invest in businesses, fueling further industrial growth. This era also saw the establishment of labour laws aimed at improving conditions for workers. Child labour laws emerged in response to public outcry over the exploitation of children in factories. These laws were hard-fought victories, often spearheaded by activists and social reformers who brought attention to the plight of working families. The Industrial Revolution, while a time of tremendous growth and innovation, was also a period of deep social change and challenges. It reshaped how people lived, worked, and interacted with one another and their environment. The lessons learned during this time continue to resonate, reminding us of the complexities that come with progress. Next, we examine how this era set up modern labour rights, politics, and technology debates. As the Industrial Revolution progressed, it didn't just reshape cities and industries, it also transformed the very fabric of everyday life. People started to experience the world differently. With urbanization on the rise, the experience of community changed. Instead of the close-knit neighborhoods of rural villages, urban areas became populated melting pots, filled with diverse groups of people, each bringing their own customs and traditions. This mixing of cultures led to a vibrant, though often chaotic, social environment. For many, it was both exciting and daunting. Imagine moving from a small village where everyone knows your name to a bustling city where anonymity is the norm. This shift created new social dynamics. People were encountering different ideas and lifestyles, often leading to clashes between traditional values and modern beliefs. It was a time of uncertainty, but also of innovation in thought and culture. The arts flourished in this environment, reflecting the changing times. Writers like Charles Dickens captured the struggles of the urban poor, while artists like J.M.W. Turner depicted the dramatic effects of industrialization on landscapes. Their works gave voice to the complexities of this new society, highlighting both the opportunities and challenges of life in a rapidly changing world. Amidst this social upheaval, education began to gain prominence. As factories grew, so did the need for skilled workers. This led to an increased emphasis on education, particularly for children. While many still faced the grim reality of child labour, reformers pushed for compulsory education laws, arguing that a more educated workforce would benefit society as a whole. By the late 19th century, many countries began to establish public schooling systems. This focus on education laid the groundwork for future generations, allowing them access to opportunities that previous generations could only dream of. Yet, as society evolved, so too did the challenges. The very technology that drove progress also created a host of new social issues. Factory conditions were often dire, with long hours, low wages, and dangerous environments. Workers began to organise, forming labour unions to fight for their rights. Strikes became more common as workers demanded fair wages, reasonable hours, and safe working conditions. These early labour movements were not without conflict. Strikes could turn violent, and clashes between workers and the police were not unusual. The tension between the working class and the industrial elite grew, leading to a broader dialogue about economic justice and workers' rights. This period also saw the emergence of political movements advocating for change. Socialism and other ideologies gained traction, proposing alternatives to the capitalist system that had driven industrial growth. Thinkers like Karl Marx critiqued the inequalities inherent in capitalism, and arguing that it benefited only a few at the expense of many. His ideas sparked debates about class struggle and the rights of workers, influencing labour movements across Europe and beyond. These discussions were not just theoretical, they led to real political changes, including the adoption of laws to protect workers and improve their living conditions. In parallel, the Industrial Revolution led to significant advances in public health. As cities grew, so did the need for clean water and sanitation. Urban planners began to realize that poor living conditions contributed to disease outbreaks. The cholera epidemics of the 19th century served as a wake-up call. Public health reformers like Edwin Chadwick advocated for better sanitation systems, leading to the establishment of sewage systems and clean water supplies in many urban areas, and this emphasis on public health marked a critical turning point as societies began to acknowledge the importance of health in overall quality of life. This focus on health extended to the workplace as well. The horrific conditions in factories prompted calls for reform, leading to the establishment of regulations aimed at improving worker safety. Laws began to emerge that restricted the use of child labour, limited working hours, and mandated safer working environments. While these changes were hard-fought and often met with resistance from factory owners, they signalled a shift in how society viewed the relationship between labour and health. Interestingly, the advancements in technology also led to improvements in agriculture during this time, which is often overlooked. The introduction of new machinery, such as the mechanical reaper and the seed drill, transformed farming. These innovations increased crop yields and changed agricultural practices, allowing fewer people to produce more food. This shift meant that fewer workers were needed on farms, pushing many rural workers to seek jobs in factories, further fueling urban growth. The Industrial Revolution's impact wasn't limited to Europe. Countries around the world began to feel its effects as the ideas and technologies spread. Nations in North America, South America, and Asia began to adopt industrial practices, transforming their economies and societies. This globalization of industry marked a new era as countries became interconnected through trade and technology. However, this also led to exploitative practices, particularly in colonies, and where resources were extracted to fuel industrial growth in the West. As we look back on this transformative era, it's clear that the Industrial Revolution was a complex tapestry of progress and struggle. It unlocked a wave of innovation that changed how people lived and worked while simultaneously highlighting the disparities and challenges that came with rapid change. The conflicts and advancements of this time laid the groundwork for the modern world, influencing everything from labour rights to global trade. The legacy of the Industrial Revolution is not just a chapter in the past, it remains an ongoing story. The Industrial Revolution brought about profound changes that still resonate today, particularly in how we perceive and interact with work. As factories became the norm, the nature of labour shifted dramatically, and many people left their agricultural roots, entering a world where they would be part of a massive machine, both literally and metaphorically. The factory system required workers to adhere to strict schedules, often working long hours in repetitive tasks. This marked a departure from the flexible rhythms of farm life, where the seasons dictated work patterns. Imagine waking up before dawn, heading to a factory where the air is thick with dust and the sounds of machinery drown out conversation. This was the reality for countless workers. The traditional notion of craftsmanship began to fade as mass production took hold. Skilled artisans, who once took pride in their work, found themselves replaced by machines that could produce goods faster and cheaper. This shift created a new class of labourers, whose labour was often undervalued and exploited. But alongside the dreary factory life emerged a sense of community among workers. They shared experiences, both the burdens of their jobs and the burgeoning hope for a better future. As workers began to organise, they discovered the power of solidarity. They formed unions, which became an essential part of the labour landscape. These groups fought not just for better wages and working conditions, but also for recognition as legitimate voices in the economic conversation. The first successful strikes in various industries marked a turning point. showcasing the growing strength of the working class. As labour movements gained momentum, so did the push for social reforms. The harsh realities of working conditions made it clear that changes were necessary. The Factory Act in Britain, for instance, began to regulate hours and improve safety standards. The introduction of child labour laws aimed to protect the most vulnerable, ensuring that children would no longer be forced into the harsh conditions of factories. The campaigns for these reforms often faced fierce opposition from industrialists, who were reluctant to relinquish their control over the workforce. This push for reform wasn't just confined to labour issues. The broader societal changes prompted new ways of thinking about governance and rights. Political movements advocating for social justice began to gain traction. In Britain, figures like William Morris and the Fabians championed ideas of socialism and social democracy, influencing thought and policy. Their vision was for a society that prioritised the welfare of all citizens rather than just the wealthy elite. The rise of these movements reflected a growing awareness that economic systems could, and should, change to serve everyone. As cities expanded, they became melting pots of ideas and cultures, fostering a climate ripe for innovation. New forms of entertainment emerged, from music halls to theatres, reflecting the joys and struggles of urban life. The arts thrived, creating a dynamic cultural scene that reflected the complexities of this new society. Writers, artists, and musicians captured the essence of their times, often critiquing the very systems that fueled their livelihoods. This vibrant cultural landscape provided a counterbalance to the harsh conditions many workers faced, offering a sense of hope and identity amid the chaos. Public health became another critical area of focus during this time. The rapid growth of cities, paired with inadequate infrastructure, led to public health crises. Epidemics of diseases like cholera and typhoid highlighted the need for better sanitation and healthcare. Social reformers and health advocates pushed for changes that would protect the urban population. Their efforts led to the construction of sewage systems, clean water supplies, and improved living conditions. This marked a significant shift in how society viewed health, not simply as a personal matter, but as a collective responsibility. Interestingly, the Industrial Revolution also sparked advancements in transportation. The development of railroads and steamships revolutionized how goods and people moved. This network connected cities and regions, facilitating trade and communication on an unprecedented scale. Suddenly, a farmer in the countryside could sell produce to an industrial city hundreds of miles away. The logistics of supply and demand transformed, creating new markets and opportunities. This interconnectedness fueled economic growth, but it also raised questions about the sustainability of such rapid expansion. As we look back, it's evident that the Industrial Revolution was more than just an economic transformation. It was a pivotal moment that altered the course of human history. The challenges faced by workers, the push for social reforms, and the explosion of cultural innovation all contributed to shaping modern society. The era laid the groundwork for contemporary conversations about labour rights, public health, and social justice. But the story doesn't end there. The technological advancements and social changes sparked by the Industrial Revolution continued to evolve, influencing future generations. Innovations in technology and shifts in societal values would pave the way for the next wave of change, the age of digital technology and globalization. The legacy of the Industrial Revolution is not merely a chapter in history, it is a continuing narrative that shapes our world today. As we continue, keep in mind how the past informs present-day challenges and opportunities. Progress is often accompanied by struggle, but collective action and innovation can help societies adapt and thrive. As the Industrial Revolution continued to unfold, one of the most significant shifts was in technology itself. The steam engine, invented by James Watt in the late 18th century, revolutionized industry and transportation. Watt's innovation didn't just improve existing engines, it made them more efficient and practical for widespread use. Imagine a world where machines could now power factories and transport goods at speeds previously unimaginable. This marked the beginning of a new era where mechanical power began to replace human and animal labour. Steam engines were not exclusive to factories. They also fueled locomotives that crisscrossed the landscape, connecting distant towns and cities. Railroads took off rapidly, with the first public railway, the Stockton and Darlington Railway, opening in England in 1825. This was a game-changer. Suddenly it was possible to move goods and people with speed and efficiency that transformed commerce and daily life. Towns that were once isolated became accessible. Markets expanded, allowing farmers and producers to reach urban consumers eager for their products. With these changes, whole industries sprung up around the railroads, from construction to the manufacturing of railway cars. But the impact of the steam engine went beyond transportation. It also encouraged innovations in manufacturing processes. Factories could now operate machinery powered by steam, leading to increased production rates. This shift meant that products could be made faster and cheaper, which in turn made them more accessible to a broader audience. Consider how steel production took off during this period. The process known as the Bessemer method, developed by Henry Bessemer in the 1850s, allowed for the mass production of steel. This new material was essential for building everything from railways to machinery, marking a significant turning point in industrial capability. Now, let's talk about the human aspect of these technological advancements. The rise of industry created a demand for labour. People flocked to cities in search of jobs, leading to urbanisation on an unprecedented scale. Cities like Manchester and Liverpool grew rapidly during this time, transforming from small towns into bustling centres of industry. But with this rapid growth came significant challenges. Urban areas struggled to provide adequate housing, sanitation and public services. Overcrowded living conditions became common, leading to social issues that would later spark reform movements. Amidst all this change, education started to gain importance. The push for a more educated workforce became evident as more complex jobs emerged in factories. The need for skilled labour meant that basic education was no longer a luxury but a necessity. This shift paved the way for public education systems, making it possible for more children to attend school and gain skills relevant to the changing economy. The Industrial Revolution also cultivated a spirit of entrepreneurship. As new technologies and production methods emerged, individuals began to seek out business opportunities. This was the era of the self-made man, where people could rise from humble beginnings through hard work and innovation. Think about individuals like Andrew Carnegie, who started as a poor immigrant and went on to become a titan of the steel industry. His story was emblematic of the new opportunities available during this period, even if the path was often fraught with challenges and hardships. However, it's crucial to remember that this new industrial landscape wasn't always idyllic. While some thrived, many faced grueling conditions. Labourers often worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week for minimal pay. Safety regulations were virtually non-existent, leading to dangerous working environments. Accidents were common, and workers had little recourse if they were injured or mistreated. This harsh reality led to a growing awareness among workers of their rights. Movements advocating for labour rights gained traction as the working class began to unite. The formation of unions became a powerful response to the exploitation workers faced. These organisations fought for better wages, reasonable working hours and safer conditions. The struggle wasn't easy. Strikes were met with resistance from employers and sometimes violent repression. But these efforts were vital in bringing attention to labour issues and sparked broader conversations about workers' rights. The Industrial Revolution also had a lasting impact on social structures. The traditional class system shifted as a new middle class emerged, composed of factory owners, managers, and skilled workers. This group began to wield significant economic power, changing the dynamics of society. Meanwhile, the working class started to assert its identity, leading to a more complex social landscape where class struggle became a defining characteristic of the era. As the 19th century progressed, the effects of the Industrial Revolution continued to ripple outward. The concepts of capitalism and free market economies began to take shape as industrialists promoted ideas that prioritized competition and profit. This shift would lay the groundwork for economic theories and political ideologies that are still relevant today. Interestingly, the Industrial Revolution also had environmental consequences that would shape future discussions about sustainability. The drive for industrial growth led to increased coal mining and deforestation. Air and water pollution became pressing issues as cities expanded, raising concerns about the long-term impact on health and the environment. These early warnings about industrialization's toll on nature would eventually lead to environmental movements, which continue to resonate in our current discussions about climate change and sustainability. The era set in motion a series of technological advancements and social changes that would define not just the 19th century, but the modern world itself. The repercussions of the Industrial Revolution were felt across continents, influencing economies and societies globally. As we look at the intricate web of connections formed during this time, it becomes clear that the seeds of our current industrial and technological landscape were sown in this vibrant, tumultuous period. In the next segment, we'll explore how these developments influence global trade and the rise of imperialism, shaping international relations in ways that still affect us today. Let's unpack this in detail. Let's focus on how the Industrial Revolution influenced global trade and imperialism. The advancements in technology and production didn't just change life in Britain or other industrializing nations, they reshaped the entire world. With factories producing goods at an unprecedented scale, countries began looking beyond their borders for resources and markets. This quest for materials to fuel industry and places to sell finished products led to a new age of imperialism. One of the key driving forces behind this expansion was the insatiable demand for raw materials. As factories churned out textiles, machinery, and other goods, they needed a steady supply of cotton, rubber, metals, and other resources. Nations like Britain sought these materials from colonies around the world. For example, the British Empire's control over India became crucial for sourcing cotton, which was essential for the textile industry. The connection was straightforward. The more factories produced, the more raw materials they needed, which encouraged further expansion into foreign lands. Let's think about the impact of the steam engine again. The same technology that transformed transportation and manufacturing also played a vital role in connecting distant markets. With steamships and railways, transporting goods became faster and more efficient. This logistical revolution made it feasible to ship items across oceans and continents. Suddenly, products that were once limited to local markets could reach consumers halfway around the world. The global economy began to take shape as trade networks flourished. In many cases, this expansion came at a significant cost. Colonized nations often faced exploitation. Their economies became tied to the needs of industrial powers, which frequently led to the extraction of resources without fair compensation. The local populations were often marginalized or forced into labor to support the demands of distant markets. For instance, in Africa, the extraction of resources like rubber and minerals was brutal, leading to widespread suffering among indigenous people. In addition to the harsh realities of resource extraction, the age of imperialism also led to cultural exchanges, but not always on equal terms. Colonizers brought their languages, traditions, and institutions to colonized lands, which sometimes resulted in the loss of local cultures. Schools and systems of governance were introduced, often sidelining indigenous practices and leading to a complicated legacy of both progress and oppression. As nations expanded their empires, competition grew among them. Industrial powers scrambled for colonies, leading to conflicts and tensions that would shape international relations. The Berlin Conference of 1884, where European nations divided Africa among themselves, is a stark example of how imperial ambitions were pursued without regard for the existing cultures or societies. This division would have long-lasting repercussions that are still felt today. The Industrial Revolution also spurred innovation in communication technologies. The telegraph, invented in the 1830s, allowed for near-instantaneous communication across great distances. This development was crucial for managing vast empires and coordinating trade. Imagine being able to send a message from London to India in a matter of minutes. It changed how businesses operated and how empires were governed. This enhanced communication played a crucial role in supporting the rapid expansion of trade networks and imperial ventures. With all this in mind, it's easy to see how the Industrial Revolution laid the groundwork for modern globalization. The interconnectedness of economies began to take shape, prompting a new understanding of how nations interact and depend on each other. Countries that embraced industrialization rapidly became major players on the world stage, while those that lagged behind often struggled to keep pace. The consequences of this global shift were profound. Economic theories began to emerge that reflected the new realities of trade and industry. Adam Smith, often considered the father of modern economics, wrote about free markets and competition, were ideas that gained traction during the Industrial Revolution and influenced capitalist doctrines. As nations began to prioritize economic growth, these concepts took center stage, shaping policies and practices that continue to influence world economics. But as trade expanded, so did the complexities of international relations. Countries began forming alliances and engaging in diplomacy to protect their interests in the face of competition. This dynamic eventually contributed to the tensions that led to major conflicts, including the world wars of the 20th century. While we often focus on the technological advancements of the Industrial Revolution, it's essential to recognize its profound social and political implications. The war for resources and control over markets didn't just affect the nations involved. It set the stage for a global landscape filled with conflict, cooperation, and competition. As we look back, the Industrial Revolution was not merely an era of machines and factories. It was also a time that reshaped human relationships, economics, and the very fabric of societies worldwide. The rise of imperialism and the expansion of trade networks were, in many ways, a direct response to the changes wrought by industrialization. Next, we'll delve into how these developments influence social movements and political ideologies, including the fight for rights and representation. This section focuses on that critical part of the Industrial Revolution and its lasting legacy. The Industrial Revolution didn't just transform economies, it also sparked significant social movements and political ideologies that forever changed the landscape of rights and representation. As factories rose and urban centres swelled with workers, the conditions of labour became a focal point for change. Many factory workers faced gruelling hours, unsafe environments, and minimal pay, leading to a growing discontent among the working class. This discontent was the breeding ground for various movements aimed at improving conditions and advocating for rights. One of the earliest and most influential movements was the labour movement. Workers began to organise, forming unions to collectively bargain for better wages, reasonable hours, and safer working conditions. These unions quickly became powerful entities, pushing back against the often exploitative practices of factory owners. For example, the Factory Acts, A series of laws passed in Britain during the 19th century aimed to regulate working conditions. This included limits on working hours, especially for women and children who were disproportionately employed in factories. Reformers argued that children should not be toiling away for long hours in dangerous conditions. The push for these reforms highlighted a growing awareness of workers' rights as human rights. As the labour movement gained momentum, the fight for suffrage also emerged. Women, who often worked in factories, began to demand not only better working conditions but also the right to vote. The suffragette movement, particularly vibrant in Britain and the United States, focused on securing political representation for women. Activists like Emmeline Pankhurst and Susan B. and Anthony became symbols of this struggle, advocating for equality in a society that had long marginalised women. Their efforts were not just about gaining the right to vote. They sought to challenge the societal norms that dictated the roles of women in both the workplace and the home. The impact of these movements was far-reaching. As workers organised and women fought for their rights, new political ideologies began to take shape. Socialism, for instance, gained traction as a response to the harsh realities of industrial capitalism. Thinkers like Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels critiqued the capitalist system, arguing that it led to the exploitation of the working class. In their view, the means of production should be owned collectively, ensuring that wealth was distributed more equitably. Yet this ideology sparked conversations about the role of government in the economy and justice for the working class, leading to the foundation of various socialist movements worldwide. In parallel, liberalism also gained momentum, advocating for individual rights and freedoms. As industrialization progressed, the idea that government should protect personal liberties became more popular. Figures like John Stuart Mill championed the importance of individual rights, free speech, and the need for government accountability. This was a direct response to the oppressive conditions many faced under both capitalist and aristocratic systems. Political discourse began to shift, emphasizing the importance of civil rights and the necessity of representation in government. As these ideologies battled for prominence, the impact of the Industrial Revolution on society became increasingly clear. Education began to be viewed as essential for all, not just the wealthy. The establishment of public education systems was another significant response to the demands of an increasingly literate and politically aware populace. Education was seen as a way to empower individuals, providing them with the tools to engage in political discourse and advocate for their rights. In addition to these movements, the Industrial Revolution also influenced the arts and culture. Writers and artists began to reflect the experiences of the working class and the rapid changes society was undergoing. The realism movement in literature and art, for instance, sought to portray life as it was, gritty, challenging, but also filled with hope for change. Authors like Charles Dickens and Émile Zola depicted the struggles of the poor and the injustices of industrial society, raising awareness and empathy for the plight of the working class. As we explore these social movements and ideologies further, it's fascinating to consider how they laid the groundwork for future advancements in human rights. The fight for labour rights and women's suffrage didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process that required persistence and resilience. The successes and failures of these movements shape the world we live in today. The ripple effects of the Industrial Revolution can still be felt in contemporary discussions around workers' rights, gender equality, and the role of government in regulating the economy. As we look back, we see a time marked not just by machines and factories, but by a powerful shift in social consciousness, urging society to rethink the value of individuals and the importance of equitable treatment. Next, we'll examine the technological advancements that emerged from this period, exploring how innovations like electricity and the internal combustion engine transformed daily life and set the stage for modern society. Stick with us as we uncover the exciting developments that arose from the Industrial Revolution and their lasting impact on our world. By the late 19th and early 20th century, the Industrial Revolution was no longer just about early factories and social movements. It was also about major technological advances that reshaped daily life. Think about it. The shift from hand tools to powerful machines changed not only how goods were produced, but also how people lived and interacted with each other. One of the most significant innovations during this time was the widespread use of electricity. Before the advent of electricity, daily life relied heavily on natural light and manual labour. With the introduction of electric power, evenings transformed. People could extend their work hours, and businesses could operate late into the night. Thomas Edison's invention of the practical light bulb in the late 1870s was a game-changer. It illuminated homes and streets, leading to a safer, more vibrant nighttime economy. Suddenly, cities could pulse with life after dark, and people began to socialize or work in ways that were previously unthinkable. But electricity wasn't the only major player in this transformation. The internal combustion engine revolutionized transportation. Before this, steam power dominated, but it had limitations, especially in terms of mobility and speed. The development of gasoline engines opened up new possibilities for personal and commercial transport. Cars, motorcycles, and eventually airplanes became common sights. Imagine the sense of freedom that came with being able to travel long distances quickly. This change didn't just affect individuals, it redefined commerce and trade. Goods could be transported more efficiently than ever before, connecting markets in ways that had been impossible a century earlier. Let's pause for a moment to think about how these innovations filtered into everyday life. With the rise of the automobile, suburbs began to sprout around cities. People could live further away from their jobs, leading to the development of a car-centric culture that we still see today. It wasn't just about getting from point A to point B, it was about redefining community and lifestyle. Shopping became more accessible, and family outings could happen with a simple drive. Alongside transportation, advancements also emerged in manufacturing processes. The invention of the assembly line, famously popularized by Henry Ford in the early 20th century, changed industry forever. This method allowed for rapid production of goods, making items like cars affordable for the average person. Picture a factory floor where each worker performs a specific task repeatedly. This specialization increased efficiency but also raised questions about workers' rights. As jobs became more monotonous, the paradox of progress was evident. While more goods became available, the nature of work transformed dramatically. As these technologies continued to evolve, they also had an environmental impact. Factories spewed smoke, and cities filled with pollution. The initial glory of industrial progress was often shadowed by the grim realities of health hazards and environmental degradation. People began to recognize the toll that unchecked industrialization took on their surroundings. This realization would eventually lead to growing environmental movements, but that's a chapter for another day. Shifting gears a bit, let's explore how these technological advances influenced education and literacy. As machines took over more manual jobs, a demand for skilled labor emerged. It wasn't enough to just have workers who could follow orders. Industries needed people who understood how to operate and maintain complex machinery. This need spurred the expansion of educational institutions and vocational training. Schools began to focus more on science, mathematics, and engineering, recognizing their importance in the modern workforce. This shift not only raised literacy levels, but also inspired a sense of possibility among the youth. Many began to see education as a pathway to better opportunities, paving the way for future generations. The cultural impact didn't stop there. Artists and writers began to reflect on these rapid changes through their work. The Impressionist movement in art, for instance, captured the shifting landscapes of industrialized cities, painting scenes of urban life filled with energy and movement. Writers like Charles Dickens and Émile Zola explored the pressures of modern urban life and the human cost of industrial work. Music, too, was influenced by the times. The rhythms of factory life found their way into popular music, creating a unique blend of sounds that echoed the experience of the working class. This cultural dialogue became a way for people to both celebrate and critique the changes they were experiencing. Now let's consider the global impact of these advancements. The Industrial Revolution didn't stay confined to Britain and the United States. It spread to Europe, Asia, and beyond. Countries like Germany and Japan adopted industrial practices, leading to their own economic transformations. This created a new dynamic in international trade, though with nations competing for resources and markets in a rapidly changing global economy. However, this race for industrialization also brought about tensions and conflicts. As nations sought to expand their influence, imperialism took hold, with powerful countries colonizing others for raw materials. This would set the stage for future geopolitical struggles, as the effects of industrialization reached into every corner of the globe. As we connect these dots, it becomes clear that the Industrial Revolution was more than just a series of technological breakthroughs. It was a turning point that redefined how people lived, worked, and interacted with each other and their environment. The explosion of creativity, the thirst for knowledge, and the pursuit of rights were all part of the same intricate web woven during this transformative period. Looking ahead, the long-term effects become clear. The world we live in today is a product of those changes, both the triumphs and the challenges. Next, we'll dive into the global repercussions of industrialization, exploring how it reshaped cultures and societies around the world. Next, we connect the stories that trace back to this turning point. As we turn our focus to the global repercussions of industrialization, it's fascinating to see how this movement reshaped cultures and societies far beyond the borders of Britain and the United States. The Industrial Revolution was not just a localized phenomenon. It set off a chain reaction that profoundly influenced economies, societies, and even political landscapes worldwide. Starting in the early 19th century, industrialization began spreading to continental Europe. Countries like Belgium and France were quick to adopt new technologies, fueled by both competition and the desire to catch up with Britain. The textile industry, which had exploded in Britain, became a focal point of growth in these nations. Factories started to pop up, employing thousands and transforming local economies. This rapid industrial growth, however, was accompanied by significant social upheaval. The working class emerged as a distinct group, facing long hours in often dangerous conditions. Labour movements began to form, advocating for better wages and safer working environments. The struggle for workers' rights became a worldwide theme, echoing the sentiments that sparked protests in industrial hubs across Europe. Meanwhile, as the 19th century progressed, the effects of industrialization began reaching further afield, especially to places like Japan. Unlike many nations that were dragged into industrialization, Japan actively sought to modernize. After facing Western powers in the mid-1800s, it recognized the need to grow its own industrial base. The Meiji Restoration in 1868 marked the beginning of this transformation. Japan embraced Western technologies and methods, rapidly building railroads and factories. Within just a few decades, it evolved from a feudal society into a major industrial power. This transformation wasn't without its own struggles. The clash between traditional values and the demands of modernization led to significant cultural shifts, as Japan wrestled with its identity in a rapidly changing world. Across the oceans, And the impact of industrialization was also making its mark in the Americas. The United States underwent its own version of the Industrial Revolution, albeit a bit later than Europe. The Civil War acted as a catalyst, pushing the country toward industrialization. By the late 19th century, American factories were churning out goods at unprecedented rates. The introduction of assembly lines and mass production techniques allowed for the widespread availability of products, revolutionizing consumer culture. Cities like Chicago and Detroit became symbols of industrial growth, drawing people from rural areas seeking jobs and opportunities. Yet, this migration led to urban overcrowding and a host of social issues, including poverty and inequality. And here's where it gets interesting. While industrialization often promised progress and prosperity, it also brought about stark contrast between wealth and poverty. In many places, the industrial elite gained unprecedented wealth, while laborers struggled to get by. This disparity laid the groundwork for social movements that would challenge the status quo. Labor unions emerged, fighting for workers' rights, better pay, and improved working conditions. The struggles of these workers would echo through the decades, influencing everything from politics to social policy. Now let's circle back to the global stage. As industrialized nations grew stronger, they sought new markets and resources, leading to a surge in imperialism. Powerful countries, driven by their industrial might, began colonizing vast areas of Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. This quest for raw materials fueled industries back home, but also led to the exploitation of peoples and cultures in colonized regions. The legacy of these actions is still felt today, affecting global relationships and cultural dynamics. Returning to the cultural implications, the Industrial Revolution sparked a wave of creativity in the arts, literature, and philosophy. Writers like Charles Dickens painted vivid pictures of urban life, highlighting the struggles of the working class. His works became a voice for those suffering under the weight of industrialization. In the realm of art, movements like Romanticism reacted against the industrial landscape, emphasizing nature and emotion as a counterbalance to the mechanization of life. Artists such as J.M.W. Turner captured the power and beauty of both nature and the machines that were reshaping society. This period also saw the rise of new philosophical ideas about society and economy. Thinkers like Karl Marx critiqued the capitalist systems that emerged from industrialization, arguing that they led to worker exploitation and social inequality. His ideas would inspire movements and revolutions around the globe, as people sought ways to address the challenges posed by rapid industrial change. As we look back, it's clear that the Industrial Revolution was not just about machines and factories. It was a complex web of change that affected every aspect of life, from economic structures to cultural expressions. The legacies of this period continue to shape our world today, influencing everything from labor rights to environmental policies. Looking ahead, the long-term effects become clear. These stories remind us that the past is never truly behind us. It continues to inform our present and future. Next, we'll examine how industrialization influenced social structures and the role of women in the workforce. Next, we examine another major social consequence of this period. The role of women during the Industrial Revolution was especially complex and transformative. As factories sprang up and the demand for labor increased, women began to enter the workforce in unprecedented numbers. Prior to this period, women's work was largely confined to the home or small-scale domestic duties. However, with the rise of industrial jobs, many women sought employment to contribute to family income or gain financial independence. One of the most significant areas where women found work was in the textile industry. Factories needed low-wage labor, and women became a primary source. In places like Lowell, Massachusetts, young women, often referred to as mill girls, moved from rural areas to urban centres to work in factories. They earned wages that were significantly lower than their male counterparts, but it still provided them with a sense of autonomy and a chance to break away from traditional domestic roles. These women lived in boarding houses, experienced the rhythm of factory life, and even formed their own social networks. It was a mix of empowerment and exploitation, as they faced long hours in dangerous conditions for meagre pay. The conditions of work were often harsh. Factories were hot, noisy, and unsafe. Workers, including women and children, were subjected to grueling schedules, sometimes working up to 14 hours a day. As these conditions became more widely known, the seeds of labour rights movements began to sprout. Women started to advocate for change, pushing for better working conditions, fair wages, and even the right to vote. This activism laid foundational stones for future movements, showing that women weren't just passive participants in a changing world. They were agents of change. In this environment of struggle and solidarity, notable figures began to emerge. One such woman was Frances Wright, a social reformer and advocate for women's rights who fought tirelessly for the rights of workers and women alike. Her work emphasized the importance of education and economic independence for women, arguing that without these, true equality would remain unreachable. While she may not have directly influenced legislation, her ideas helped inspire future generations of women to continue fighting for their rights. Meanwhile, the Industrial Revolution also catalyzed shifts in domestic life. As men left for factory jobs, women often became responsible for managing households and caring for children on their own. This dual burden of work and home responsibilities led to a re-evaluation of women's roles in society. The concept of separate spheres, where men were seen as breadwinners and women as caretakers, began to clash with the realities of economic necessity. As we move into the late 19th century, the emergence of the suffragette movement began to take shape. Women who had tasted independence in the workforce were increasingly unwilling to accept limitations on their rights at home, especially the right to vote. The connection between industrialization and women's emerging rights became clearer. As women stepped into the public domain through work, they also began to demand a voice in political and social spheres. But it wasn't just women who were impacted. The roles and identities of men were changing too. With the rise of industrial jobs, traditional notions of masculinity began to shift. Many men who had once farmed or engaged in skilled trades found themselves in factories, competing for jobs that were becoming more mechanized and less reliant on individual craftsmanship. The old ways were being replaced by a new order that valued productivity and efficiency over skill and tradition. The family dynamic also transformed with the demands of industrial life. Many families found themselves working long hours in factories, leading to a blurring of the lines between home and work life. Children too were drawn into this system, often working alongside their parents to help make ends meet. Child labour became a grim reality in many industries, where kids were often employed for their small hands and nimble fingers, making them ideal for tasks in textile mills or coal mines. This exploitation sparked outrage and led to further calls for reform. A notable figure in this narrative was Lord Shaftesbury, who championed labour laws aimed at improving conditions for workers, particularly for children. His advocacy led to the Factory Act in Britain, which set limits on working hours and conditions for children and women. These early reforms mark the beginning of a long and challenging journey toward workplace rights. The cultural landscape was also evolving during this time. As women began to write and share their stories, a new literary voice emerged. Authors like Elizabeth Gaskell portrayed the struggles of the industrial working class, weaving narratives that humanized the labour experience. Gaskell's novel, Mary Barton, offers a poignant view into the life of a mill worker, illuminating the social issues of the time and helping to foster empathy among readers. Returning to the broader context, the social changes initiated by the Industrial Revolution didn't just stay confined to Great Britain or the United States. Similar patterns emerged in various parts of the world, where women began to step into roles that challenged traditional norms. In many ways, these changes laid the groundwork for future movements advocating for equality across genders. As we reflect on this part of the Industrial Revolution, it's clear the era was about far more than machines and factories. It reshaped family structures, social roles, and cultural expression. Next, we examine how industrialization affected education and literacy. As we explore the impact of the Industrial Revolution on education and literacy, it's important to recognize that this era wasn't just about economic transformation. It also marked a pivotal shift in how people learned and accessed information. With the rise of factories and urban life, there was a growing need for an educated workforce. Factories required not only physical labor but also individuals who could follow instructions, understand machinery, and adapt to new technologies. This led to an increased emphasis on education, particularly for children who were entering the workforce at increasingly young ages. Before the Industrial Revolution, education in many parts of the world was often limited to the wealthy. Most working-class children didn't receive formal schooling, and instead learned skills through family or apprenticeship. However, as industrial jobs became more prevalent, the need for basic literacy and numeracy skills grew. Businesses began to recognize that a more educated workforce could improve productivity and efficiency. This realization sparked the establishment of public schools, which aimed to provide basic education to children from all backgrounds. In Britain, this shift took shape with the Education Act of 1870, also known as the Forster Act. It aimed to make education accessible to all children, regardless of their family's financial situation. Schools were set up to provide basic instruction in reading, writing, and arithmetic. While this was a significant step forward, the reality was often still grim. Many children were forced to balance long hours in factories with their schooling, leading to exhaustion and poor learning conditions. Despite these challenges, the idea that education could empower individuals began to take root. The literacy rate began to climb during this time, especially among the working class. As children learned to read, they gained access to newspapers, pamphlets, and books that opened up new worlds of thought and possibility. This access to information played a crucial role in shaping public opinion. Workers began to realize their collective power and started to advocate for their rights, pushing for reforms not just in labor laws, but also in education. Interestingly, the rise of reading materials also led to the emergence of a new literary culture. As more people became literate, there was a demand for books that addressed their experiences and struggles. Authors began writing stories that reflected the lives of ordinary people, highlighting their challenges and aspirations. This cultural shift began to weave together the fabric of a new society, where the voices of the working class could be heard. Another fascinating aspect of this educational transformation involved women. As they entered the workforce in record numbers, they also sought educational opportunities for themselves. Women began to organize for access to education, or advocating for the right to learn and improve their circumstances. The notion that education was vital for empowerment began to spread, and women like Mary Wollstonecraft were at the forefront of this movement. Wollstonecraft argued in her seminal work, A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, that women should have the same educational opportunities as men to achieve true equality. By the late 19th century, educational reforms had begun to take hold in various parts of the world influenced by the Industrial Revolution. In the United States, for instance, the push for universal public education gained momentum thanks to advocates who believed that a well-educated populace was essential for democracy. Horace Mann, a key figure in this movement, emphasized the importance of education in creating informed citizens. His efforts laid the groundwork for public school systems across the country. But it wasn't just about formal education. The Industrial Revolution also changed how people learned informally. As communities formed around factories, they became hubs of ideas and discussions. Workers shared knowledge and experiences, creating informal networks of learning. Trade unions emerged, providing not only a collective voice for workers, but also a platform for education on labour rights and social issues. In parallel, the rise of printing technology made books and newspapers more accessible than ever. The steam-powered printing press allowed for the mass production of written materials, which meant that information could spread rapidly. Newspapers became vital sources of news, and literacy became a tool to navigate the increasingly complex world of industrial society. Workers were now able to engage with political issues, labour movements, and societal debates in ways that were previously unavailable to them. The effects of this educational transformation were profound. As people became more literate and aware, they started to challenge existing societal norms. This newfound awareness contributed to significant social changes, including movements for workers' rights, suffrage, and education reform. The Industrial Revolution not only reshaped economies but also laid the groundwork for a more informed and engaged citizenry. As we look back on this period, it's clear that education and literacy played crucial roles in the transformations that occurred during the Industrial Revolution. The era fostered a collective awakening, where individuals began to understand their rights and responsibilities in a rapidly changing world. This empowerment through knowledge became a cornerstone for future movements aimed at achieving social justice and equality. Next, we shift to the intersection of technology and labour during the Industrial Revolution, and how innovation changed both production and the nature of work. During the Industrial Revolution, technology and labour were inextricably linked. As industries grew, so did the need for innovative machinery that could meet the demands of production. This era saw a surge in inventions that transformed not just manufacturing processes, but also the daily lives of workers. The introduction of machines changed everything from how goods were produced to the nature of work itself. Take the steam engine, for example. Invented by James Watt in the late 18th century, it revolutionized transportation and manufacturing. Factories could now operate on a larger scale, and goods could be produced faster than ever before. This increase in efficiency brought about a significant shift in labour practices. Before this, most manufacturing was done by skilled artisans who crafted products by hand. With steam power, production moved into factories, where unskilled labourers could operate machines. This change led to the rise of factory jobs that required less craftsmanship, but demanded more workers to operate increasingly complex machinery. So, what did this mean for workers? While it created new job opportunities, it also came with downsides. Many workers found themselves in grueling conditions, spending long hours in poorly ventilated factories. The work was repetitive and exhausting, often leading to physical and mental strain. Yet, despite these harsh realities, factories attracted people from rural areas seeking better economic prospects. Urban centres grew rapidly as people flocked to cities in search of jobs. This migration marked a significant shift in population distribution, creating densely packed urban areas. Interestingly, the shift from rural to urban living fostered a unique environment for innovation. As workers interacted with one another, they began to share ideas, skills, and experiences. This exchange wasn't limited to just practical knowledge. It also included discussions about rights, wages, and working conditions. Workers started to recognize their collective strength, sparking the early seeds of labour movements. the rise of trade unions became a vital response to the exploitation faced by many factory workers. These unions fought for better wages, reasonable hours, and safer working conditions, laying the groundwork for labour rights that we often take for granted today. While the mechanisation of labour was a defining feature of the Industrial Revolution, it also set the stage for conversations about the future of work. As machines took over certain tasks, fears arose about job security. Would there still be jobs for everyone? This concern is still relevant today as we navigate the implications of automation and artificial intelligence. The innovations of this period also had cultural implications. As people began to engage with new technologies, they developed a fascination with progress. The idea of the self-made man gained momentum. Individuals believed they could rise through hard work and innovation. This mindset not only fueled entrepreneurship, but also shaped societal values around success and ambition. Now, let's pivot for a moment to the role of women during this time. The Industrial Revolution didn't just alter the landscape for men, it also opened doors for women in the workforce. Women began to find employment in factories, albeit often in lower-paying roles. While they faced significant challenges, including discrimination and limited opportunities for advancement, their presence in the workforce marked a shift in societal norms. This newfound participation would eventually contribute to movements advocating for women's rights, including the push for suffrage. Contrary to traditional narratives, many women played crucial roles in early labour movements. They organised strikes, protested against poor working conditions, and fought for better pay. One such example is the Lowell Female Labour Reform Association, founded in 1844, which organised around shorter hours and safer conditions for women workers. This organisation highlighted a growing awareness of gender inequality in the workforce. Women were not just fighting for their rights, they were also advocating for systemic change that would benefit all workers. As the Industrial Revolution progressed, the interplay between technology and labour continued to evolve. Factories began to adopt assembly line techniques, which further streamlined production, but also intensified the nature of work. Workers became specialised, focusing on a single task rather than crafting an entire product. This specialisation increased efficiency but often stripped jobs of their creativity and fulfilment. However, the impact of the assembly line extended beyond factories. It also influenced consumer culture. As products became cheaper to produce, they became more widely available. This change led to a surge in consumption, altering lifestyles and encouraging a culture of materialism. For many, the ability to purchase goods that were once considered luxuries became a defining characteristic of modern life. Navigating through this industrialized landscape meant adapting to constant change. Workers had to learn new skills and adapt to new technologies regularly. In many ways, this necessity for adaptability became a hallmark of the Industrial Revolution. The connection between technology and labour wasn't just about machines, it was about how people responded to change and redefined their roles in an evolving economy. In summary, the relationship between technology and labour during the Industrial Revolution was complex and dynamic. It created new opportunities and challenges, reshaped societal structures, and laid the groundwork for the labour rights movements that followed. As we move forward, we'll explore another layer of this story, the environmental impact of industrialization. How did the drive for progress affect the planet? It turns out the consequences were significant and often alarming. Now let's examine this crucial environmental dimension. The Industrial Revolution brought with it a wave of changes that extended far beyond just the workplace. One of the most significant and often overlooked impacts was on the environment. As factories sprang up, so did pollution. The relentless demand for coal to fuel steam engines and power machinery led to widespread excavation and deforestation. Picture this. By the mid-19th century, cities like Manchester and Birmingham were surrounded by soot-laden skies and rivers choked with industrial waste. The air quality deteriorated, and health issues became rampant among the working class, who lived in close proximity to factories. Think about it. Back then, the concept of environmental conservation was virtually non-existent. The focus was on progress, productivity, and profit. The smoke pouring out of chimneys was often seen as a sign of productivity rather than a health hazard. Workers were inhaling toxic fumes daily, leading to conditions like bronchitis and lung disease. It's hard to imagine now, but people had to prioritize work over their own health, and many didn't realize the long-term consequences of their environment until it was too late. This environmental disregard also extended to water sources. Rivers were used as dumping grounds for industrial waste. The water became polluted, impacting not only the workers who relied on it for drinking and sanitation, but also local ecosystems. Fish populations dwindled, and entire habitats were destroyed. Communities often found themselves battling diseases linked to contaminated water. It was a grim picture painted by progress, and yet society was so consumed by the notion of advancement that these environmental issues went largely unaddressed for years. Interestingly, thus public awareness began to shift as the negative effects became harder to ignore. The mid-19th century saw the first stirrings of environmental movements as people started to rally against pollution and advocate for cleaner living conditions. The Great Stink of 1858, for example, was a pivotal moment for London. The smell from the Thames, filled with sewage and industrial waste, became unbearable, prompting the government to take action. This led to the construction of an extensive sewer system designed by engineer Joseph Bazalgette. The outcry for clean water and air sparked a growing concern for public health that would influence policies for years to come. As awareness grew, reformers began to push for legislation to protect workers and the environment alike. This was a complex battle. On one hand, workers desired better conditions and wages. On the other, industrialists argued that economic growth and efficiency were paramount. The tension between these two perspectives led to significant debates on how to balance progress with health and safety. This dialogue hasn't stopped. It remains at the forefront of discussions about sustainability today. The Industrial Revolution also prompted urban planning changes in response to overcrowded and polluted cities. In the late 19th century, city planners began to advocate for green spaces, parks, and better sanitation facilities. This shift recognized that a healthy environment was essential for a productive workforce. Architects and urban designers sought to create cities that integrated nature with industrial space, promoting both livability and productivity. Fast forward to today, and we see how this conversation has evolved. The legacy of the Industrial Revolution still informs our understanding of the relationship between industry and the environment. As we grapple with climate change and environmental degradation, we often look back to this period to understand how unchecked industrial growth can lead to long-term consequences. But the environmental impact of the Industrial Revolution wasn't just about pollution and health issues. It also led to a broader cultural shift in how people perceived nature. The Romantic movement, which coincided with this industrial growth, emphasized a return to nature, a reaction against the harsh realities of industrial life. Artists and writers began exploring themes that celebrated the beauty of the natural world, advocating for its preservation. This cultural response helped sow the seeds for future conservation efforts. Of course, we can't talk about the Industrial Revolution without mentioning its global implications. As European nations industrialized, they sought resources from their colonies, leading to an even more profound environmental impact worldwide. The extraction of natural resources and the expansion of agriculture in colonized regions often resulted in deforestation and loss of biodiversity. The demand for goods like cotton and sugar drove practices that exploited both land and people. This complex web of industrialization tied not only to environmental degradation, but also to social injustices that persist today. So, when you think about the Industrial Revolution, remember that it wasn't just a phase of technological advancement. It was a turning point that reshaped our relationship with the environment. The choices made during this time continue to resonate in the ways we approach industry, labour, and sustainability now. As we progress into the future, understanding this intricate past is crucial. It's essential to learn from the mistakes and successes of this transformative period as we strive for a balance between progress and preservation. Now, let's focus on another major aspect of the Industrial Revolution: how innovation reshaped social structures. Innovation during the Industrial Revolution was like a spark that ignited change across multiple aspects of society. It wasn't just about machines and factories. It fundamentally reshaped how people lived, worked, and interacted with one another. Imagine walking through a city in the late 18th century, years where horse-drawn carriages ruled the roads. Fast forward a few decades, and you'd find steam engines chugging along, powering everything from trains to textiles. This shift didn't just boost productivity, it altered the daily rhythms of life. One of the most noticeable impacts of innovation was on education. As factories grew, so did the need for a skilled workforce. This spurred the establishment of formal education systems aimed at teaching children not only basic literacy, but also practical skills. In many places, education became more accessible, paving the way for a more informed populace. This was a significant turn from earlier times when education was often a privilege reserved for the elite. Now, kids from working-class backgrounds could learn trades, which in turn helped them secure better jobs. The result? A slow but steady rise in social mobility, shifting the landscape of class structures. But the changes in society weren't just economic or educational, they were also cultural. Take a moment to think about the arts and literature that emerged during this time. The Industrial Revolution inspired writers, poets, and artists to explore new themes. The gritty realities of life in rapidly industrializing cities found expression in the works of Charles Dickens and the poetry of the Romantics. They captured the struggles of the working class, highlighting the harsh living conditions that many faced. This cultural response influenced societal attitudes toward labour and class, raising awareness and empathy for the plight of the everyday worker. Now, let's talk about the role of women during this period. The Industrial Revolution dramatically altered women's roles in the workforce. At first, many women found employment in textile mills and factories, earning wages that were crucial for their families. This was a significant shift from traditional expectations, where women were primarily caregivers and homemakers. However, the conditions in these factories were often dire. Long hours, low pay, and unsafe environments marked their work experience. The stark realities led to the rise of early labour movements, with women at the forefront advocating for better conditions and rights. As women began to enter the workforce in larger numbers, this also spurred changes in family dynamics. With more women earning money, the traditional family structure started to shift. The idea of the nuclear family became more pronounced, and with it, a new set of expectations for both men and women in domestic roles. Men were often seen as breadwinners, while women balanced work and home life, a pattern that has continued to evolve over the years. The Industrial Revolution also brought about urbanization on a massive scale. As factories popped up, people flocked to cities in search of work. This migration transformed rural landscapes into bustling urban centres almost overnight. Cities like Manchester and Liverpool saw populations swell, leading to crowded living conditions. Housing was often inadequate, with many families crammed into tiny tenements. Public health became a pressing issue, as inadequate sanitation and housing led to outbreaks of disease. Interestingly, this urbanization laid the groundwork for modern city planning. The challenges of overcrowding prompted planners to think about how to create livable spaces. Parks, public transport, and infrastructure began to take shape, reflecting a new understanding of urban living. The rise of city life changed the way people interacted with one another. Communities formed around shared experiences of industrial life, which contributed to the development of a distinct urban culture. In the realm of communication, the Industrial Revolution also brought significant advancements. The invention of the telegraph revolutionized how information was shared. For the first time, news could travel long distances in mere moments. This innovation not only impacted businesses, but also connected people in ways never thought possible. Imagine receiving news from a loved one halfway across the country within minutes. This shift in communication helped foster a sense of shared experience among people, bridging gaps that once felt insurmountable. As we dig deeper into the concept of innovation during this time, we begin to see how it set the stage for future technological advancements. The inventions of the 18th and 19th centuries laid the groundwork for what would come next. The steam engine, for example, was a precursor to the electric motor, which would later drive the second wave of industrialization in the late 19th century. The innovations didn't just end with machinery, they influenced various fields, from medicine to transportation. This era of invention created a lasting legacy that pushed society toward the modern age. With all these changes happening, it's essential to recognize that not everyone welcomed them. There were staunch critics of industrialization who voiced concerns about the loss of traditional ways of life and the impact of machines on human labor. The Luddites, for example, were a group of skilled artisans who protested against the rise of mechanization by destroying machines that threatened their jobs. Their movement highlighted a significant tension between progress and tradition, a theme that resonates even today. As we take a step back, it's clear that the Industrial Revolution was about more than just gears and factories. It was a period that redefined how people lived and worked, reshaping societal structures in profound ways. This legacy continues to influence our current world, reminding us that innovation is a double-edged sword. It can bring progress, but it also demands that we grapple with the challenges it presents. And as we look ahead, understanding this complex history is key to navigating the ever-changing landscape of modern life. Next, we examine how these social changes influenced politics, including new ideologies and movements focused on rights, governance, and individual agency. The Industrial Revolution didn't just reshape economies, it had a profound impact on politics and governance. As society transformed, new ideologies emerged, often in response to the inequities and struggles brought about by industrialization. The rapid changes in how people lived and worked laid the groundwork for a broader discussion about rights, governance, and social responsibility. One of the most significant political movements to rise during this time was socialism. As workers toiled in factories for long hours and meagre wages, many began to feel that capitalism was failing them. The stark divide between the wealthy factory owners and the impoverished labourers led to a growing sense of injustice. Think about it. While industrialists amassed fortunes, many workers struggled to afford basic necessities. This disparity fueled the idea that the means of production should be collectively owned, leading to a push for social reforms aimed at improving conditions for the working class. Key figures emerged in this landscape advocating for change. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, for instance, penned the Communist Manifesto in 1848, calling for workers to unite against their oppressors. Marx argued that capitalism was inherently exploitative and that a class struggle would ultimately lead to a revolution. Their ideas spread across Europe, as capturing the imaginations of those who felt marginalized by the industrial system. This was more than just political theory. It became a rallying cry for labour movements everywhere. As labour organisations began to form, workers started advocating for their rights more openly. Trade unions became a powerful force during this time, uniting individuals in their quest for better working conditions, fair wages, and reasonable hours. An early attempt at a broad national labour federation in Britain was the Grand National Consolidated Trades Union, established in 1834. It aimed to bring together various trade groups under one umbrella to strengthen their bargaining power. This was a significant development. For the first time, workers had a collective voice, allowing them to push for reforms that would improve their lives. The push for workers' rights also intersected with the suffrage movement. As more women entered the workforce, many began to question their roles in society. The fight for women's suffrage gained momentum, as women sought not only better working conditions, but also the right to vote and participate fully in the democratic process. Leaders like Emmeline Pankhurst emerged during this time, advocating for women's rights and emphasizing the idea that political change was essential for true social reform. The connection between industrialization and political change didn't stop at socialism or suffrage. The revolution also led to a rise in liberalism. Many advocated for democratic reforms that would give ordinary citizens a say in their governance. The middle class, which had expanded alongside industrialization, began to push for political representation that reflected their growing economic power. The idea of individual rights and freedoms gained traction, leading to changes in laws and constitutions across Europe and North America. One notable example of this shift was the Reform Act of 1832 in Britain, which expanded the electorate to include more men from the working and middle classes. This was a response to the mounting pressure for political reform, showing that the demands of the industrialized populace could not be ignored. As more voices joined the conversation about governance, the landscape of politics began to shift, paving the way for future reforms. What's interesting is how these political changes were not limited to Western Europe. The ideas born from the Industrial Revolution and the subsequent movements spread across the globe. In places like Russia, the seeds of revolution were sown as industrialization took hold. The discontent among workers and peasants grew, ultimately leading to significant upheaval in the early 20th century. The struggles and theories developed during the Industrial Revolution had a ripple effect, influencing revolutions and movements worldwide, from the Russian Revolution to labour movements in Latin America. Another striking aspect of this political evolution was the response to the environmental challenges posed by industrialization. As cities grew and factories belched smoke, concerns about pollution and the environment began to surface. The Industrial Revolution marked the beginning of a new relationship between humanity and nature, was one that prompted discussions about sustainability and conservation. Think about it. This early awakening to environmental issues would eventually lead to modern movements advocating for ecological responsibility, further intertwining the political landscape with social and environmental consciousness. As we look back, it becomes clear that the Industrial Revolution set off a chain reaction of political changes that shaped the modern world. The challenges faced by workers and the shifting dynamics of power led to new ideologies and movements that sought to address the inequalities of the time. Understanding this political evolution is crucial, as it reveals how our current systems of governance, rights, and responsibilities have been influenced by the struggles and innovations of those who came before us. Next, we examine how this mix of social change, political evolution, and economic transformation influence global power dynamics and colonial rule. The Industrial Revolution didn't just stir change within nations, it also significantly altered the dynamics of global power. As countries industrialized, they began to view the world through a new lens, one shaped by economic interests and the quest for resources. The swift advancements in technology and manufacturing raised the stakes on an international scale, prompting nations to expand their territories and influence. This expansion was not just about securing raw materials, it was a matter of survival in a competitive global environment. Take Britain, for example. By the late 19th century, it was the world's leading industrial power. With vast colonies across Africa, Asia, and the Americas, Britain had access to a wealth of resources such as cotton, rubber, and minerals. This imperial ambition wasn't purely economic, though. It was intertwined with a sense of national pride and superiority, driven by the belief that industrialized nations had a duty to civilize the so-called lesser parts of the world. This mindset led to the spread of colonialism, as powerful nations sought to exert control over territories. One telling moment during this period was the scramble for Africa in the late 1800s. European powers rushed to claim parts of Africa, driven by the desire for land and resources. The Berlin Conference of 1884–85 is a key marker here, where nations like Britain, France, and Germany laid down rules for African colonization. It's staggering to think about. The continent was divided with little regard for the local populations, indigenous cultures were often disrupted, and economies transformed to serve the interests of colonial powers. This exploitation created a legacy of tension and inequality that echoes in many regions today. But let's not forget that this drive for expansion wasn't one-sided. Many colonized nations didn't simply accept their fate. Resistance movements started to grow, fueled by a desire for self-determination and justice. Figures like Mahatma Gandhi emerged, advocating for peaceful resistance against British rule in India. The juxtaposition of industrial power and local resistance highlights a crucial reality. While the Industrial Revolution empowered some, it also sparked vital movements for liberation and rights in others. As the world became more interconnected through trade and colonization, it also faced new challenges. The environmental impact of industrialization didn't just affect urban centers, it extended globally. Increased demand for resources led to deforestation, soil degradation, and a loss of biodiversity. These environmental consequences prompted early thinkers to consider sustainability. Even if the term itself wasn't widely used at the time, the connection between economic growth and environmental degradation became apparent, foreshadowing debates that would become increasingly central in the 20th and 21st centuries. One particularly interesting aspect of this global interplay was the role of technology in warfare. The advancements made during the Industrial Revolution didn't merely simplify labour, they also transformed military capabilities. The introduction of ironclad ships and modern artillery changed the nature of conflict. Nations were now equipped to wage wars on a much larger scale, and as a result, conflicts became deadlier and more widespread. The Crimean War in the 1850s showcased how industrial technology influenced military strategies and outcomes. It wasn't just about armies clashing, it was about logistics, supply lines, and the impact of new weaponry on traditional battle tactics. This evolving military landscape also played into the colonial narrative. The industrial powers, armed with superior technology and weaponry, could easily dominate less technologically advanced societies. This imbalance of power led to significant ethical questions regarding imperialism. Debates arose about the morality of colonization, with some arguing that it was a civilizing mission, while others condemned it as pure exploitation. These discussions laid the groundwork for broader human rights conversations that would emerge in the following century. As we step back and look at the broader picture, it becomes clear that the Industrial Revolution was a catalyst for change on multiple fronts. Economically, it reshaped industries and created new social classes. Politically, it sparked movements for rights and representation. Globally, it redefined power dynamics and prompted both expansion and resistance. One intriguing thing to consider is how the effects of these changes lingered long after the revolution itself. For instance, the economic systems that developed during this time laid the foundations for modern capitalism. Today, many of the inequalities and environmental issues we face can be traced back to the patterns established during this era. The Industrial Revolution was not merely a historical episode. It set in motion a series of developments that continue to shape our lives. So, what about the future? As we grapple with the legacies of industrialization, we are reminded of our responsibility to address the inequalities and environmental challenges that persist. The lessons learned from this period can guide us as we navigate contemporary issues like climate change and social justice. It prompts us to think critically about how we balance progress with responsibility, ensuring that technological advancements serve the interests of all rather than a select few. Next, we explore the cultural shifts that emerged during and after the Industrial Revolution and how creative expression responded to that upheaval. The Industrial Revolution didn't just change economies and politics, it also left a profound mark on culture and society. As factories rose and cities expanded, the daily lives of people transformed in ways that would lead to new forms of artistic expression. This era gave birth to movements in literature, art, and music that mirrored the realities and challenges of industrial life. Take, for instance, the literary movement known as Romanticism. Emerging in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, it was a direct response to the upheaval brought on by industrialization. Romantic writers such as William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge emphasized nature, emotion, and individualism. They often contrasted the beauty of the natural world with the harsh realities of industrial life. In their poetry, you can feel a longing for simpler times, even as they grappled with the rapid changes around them. It's fascinating to see how they engaged with their environment, not just as a backdrop, but as a character in its own right. Meanwhile, the rise of the novel during this period also spoke to the experiences of the working class. Authors like Charles Dickens captured the lives of those labouring in factories and the struggles they faced. His works, like Oliver Twist and Hard Times, highlighted the stark realities of poverty and child labour amid the booming economy. Dickens's vivid storytelling brought the plight of the industrial worker into the public eye, stirring social consciousness and empathy among readers. In the realm of visual art, movements like Impressionism began to emerge as artists sought to depict the changing world around them. Painters like Claude Monet and Pierre-Auguste Renoir focused on capturing light, movement, and the effects of urban life. Their work often depicted scenes from everyday life, such as bustling city streets and leisure activities in parks, showcasing how industrialization permeated even the ordinary moments of life. The brushstrokes of these artists offer a window into a world marked by both beauty and turmoil, reflecting the fast pace of change. However, it wasn't just artists and writers who responded creatively to these shifts. Music also evolved during the Industrial Revolution. Composers like Gustav Mahler and Claude Debussy began to experiment with new sounds and structures, echoing the complexities of modern life. The rise of the working class also saw the emergence of folk music, often sung in factories or during community gatherings. These songs conveyed the hopes and struggles of everyday people, creating a soundtrack for an era defined by change. But beyond the realm of art, the effects of industrialization on society were profound. Urbanization led to the growth of cities, which became hubs of activity and, unfortunately, often overcrowded and unsanitary. The population swelled as people flocked to urban areas in search of jobs. This shift marked a significant change in social dynamics. Communities were formed, but they were often fractured. The connection to the land and traditional ways of life diminished. Families were separated as members sought work in different sectors, leading to new family structures and social interactions. As cities expanded, they also faced challenges like pollution and inadequate housing. The industrial landscape was often filled with smoke, grime, and noise, leading to a public health crisis. Diseases like cholera and typhoid fever became rampant, drawing attention to the need for reform. This sparked movements for public health and sanitation, prompting the introduction of regulations aimed at improving living conditions. The harsh realities of life in industrial cities also gave rise to labour movements. Workers began to organise, pushing back against poor working conditions, long hours and low wages. The formation of trade unions became a crucial aspect of this struggle. These groups fought for workers' rights, demanding better pay, shorter hours and safer workplaces. Their actions laid the groundwork for many of the labour laws and protections we take for granted today. It's also essential to recognise the role of women during this transformative period. As industrialisation progressed, women increasingly joined the workforce, taking on roles in factories and offices. This shift marked a significant change in gender dynamics. Women began to advocate for their rights not just in the workplace but also in society. The suffrage movement gained momentum as women fought for the right to vote and for equal treatment in various aspects of life. As we reflect on these cultural shifts, it's clear that the Industrial Revolution was not just about machines and factories. It was about people and their experiences, the art, literature, music, and social movements that arose during this period reveal the complex interplay between innovation and human emotion. Looking back, it's intriguing to see how the cultural responses to industrialization continue to resonate today. We still grapple with issues of inequality, environmental degradation, and the impact of rapid change on our lives. The creative expressions that emerged during the Industrial Revolution remind us that art reflects society, and that, even amid turmoil, there's a profound human spirit that seeks to understand and articulate the world. So as we move forward, we carry with us not just the legacy of industrialization, but also the stories of those who lived through it. Their struggles, victories, and creative expressions continue to inform our understanding of progress and humanity. The Industrial Revolution was a complex chapter in history, and its echoes can still be felt in our contemporary world. Each brushstroke, each word, and each note from that time captures a piece of the human experience, inviting us to reflect on how we navigate our own paths in a fast-changing landscape. Thanks so much for joining us on this journey through the Industrial Revolution. It's been fascinating to explore how this major turning point shaped our world today. We've uncovered some incredible stories of innovation, struggle, and transformation. I hope you enjoyed the ride as much as I did. History's full of surprising twists and turns, and it's always a joy to share these moments with you. Each episode offers a glimpse into a past that's not just about dates and events, but also about the people who lived through it all. Their lives, their challenges, and their triumphs make history come alive in a way that's hard to forget. If you're curious about what's next, there's so much more to explore. We've got tons of intriguing tales from different eras waiting just around the corner. Each story opens a door to new ideas and perspectives that can change the way we think about our present and future. So, whether you're a history buff, a casual listener, or just someone looking for an engaging way to unwind, we'd love to have you back for more. There's always something new to discover, and I can't wait to share it with you. As we wrap up tonight, remember to take a moment to reflect on how far we've come and how interconnected our stories are. Life can be a bit chaotic, but diving into the past can give us a sense of perspective and appreciation. Thanks again for spending your time with us here on Past Midnight. I hope you have a wonderful night, and we'll see you next time for more stories that keep the spirit of history alive. Sleep well and take care.